everyone, Dr. Turner here, and I wanted to walk you through the components of the authentic writing assignment design because there are a lot of moving parts, and it may be useful for you to see how I think about those parts before you begin moving them around yourself. The first thing I want to talk about is the assessment process. For the first 10 years of teaching, my assessment process went something like this. I'd start off with a curriculum goal. So if I were teaching geography, I might pluck this standard out of the social studies pack, how other countries impacted North America through exploration and conflict, and go right to instruction. I'd find an article that seemed related. We'll all read Westward Ho! Then I would try to figure out some kind of assessment, usually cobbling together some quiz or exit slip. Sometimes I'd even borrow a test or quiz from the teacher next door. Now, as professional educators, you definitely know what's wrong with this. One problem being that since I created my assessment after the reading, I haven't been thoughtful about what specifically students need to do with the information. And since I've tacked on the assessment, I can't possibly teach the text in a way that would help my students do well on that assessment. I'm guessing by now that most of you are familiar with the backward design process, in which you start with the curriculum goals as I did before, only you put assessment before instruction. You think to yourself, okay, what do I treasure? What is it going to look like for students to be able to discuss exploration and conflict in a meaningful way? So I'm going to suggest that you begin crafting your writing assignment design by asking yourself, what will students know and be able to do by completing this assignment? By describing the task and determining what you value first, you'll know what to teach. If you've thumbed through your books, you may have noticed that they provide a fair amount of structure for each genre. While you're welcome to use or adapt any of these ideas, please don't feel constrained by them. Trust yourself and your own creative process. Make an assignment you love. Play with ideas and think about what you value. Try not to fall into the trap of thinking, well, that's an idea for secondary students or elementary students, so I can't use it. Once you know your learners, you can steal and adapt liberally. Which brings me to the first design consideration, knowing your learners. Can they perform operations in their heads, such as counting or adding, or do they still need fingers and objects? Can they think about abstractions like loyalty? To complete this part of the assignment, you're welcome to describe student behaviors as you see them in your classroom, but I also encourage you to go review those different developmental frameworks such as Piaget's and Erikson's, just to remind yourself of what students are doing cognitively, how they're developing emotionally and socially. So your learners come first because you want your assessments to be learner-centered and not standard-centered, or heaven forbid, book-centered. For example, if I don't know that 8th graders are hormonal and will risk life and limb for social rewards, that they are able to think in abstract terms but struggle with attention, I am not going to design meaningful assignments or build in the right kind of social structure. Design component 2, authenticity. For this part of your writing assignment design, I would like you to think about the kinds of writing people do in the real world. Because if you're going to make writing matter, it needs a purpose beyond a grade and an audience beyond the teacher. Take this example on the left side of the screen. We have basically what looks like a nature journal. So this young writer may be logging observations in order to collect data and maybe even form hypotheses. This is something scientists do. They go out, they observe the natural world, they take notes, they draw conclusions, and sometimes our best nature writers are scientists. So depending on the purpose and audience for this assignment, it could be said to be authentic. Design component 3. What will I assess and how will I assess it? Now, deciding on assignment criteria means that you're carving a complex task into measurable chunks chunks that you value. It does not mean that you score everything your students do on a rubric with 1 to 5 stars or 3 faces in varying states of unhappiness. The Latin root for assessment, assidere, means to sit beside. In an educational context, this is the process of observing, learning, describing, and collecting information. So when you conduct assessment in its purest form, you're paying attention. For instance, if you have very young learners who are just starting to write, you may observe that Shelley's gloves are starting to look like objects. Then she starts approximating letters, and sometimes these just look like sticks. But there's no real matchup between these approximated letters and the sounds that they make. But then you notice Sally's letters are starting to approximate sounds in a sentence. And that's pretty cool. But to give a student something like 3 out of 4 stars at this point is damaging. Sometimes the measurement tool is just for you because you're documenting progress and development. I will talk more about formative assessment at the end of this video because it will be important for you to have strategies for that. For now, though, think your way to the end of your unit. What will your students know and be able to do, and how will they show it to you? You can figure out what your learners need to know and be able to do by conducting a task analysis, which is design component 4. A task analysis breaks down complex tasks into smaller parts so that you can build in scaffolding in order for your learners to be successful. Say I'm trying to teach an alien how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, if my alien is to be successful, it's going to need some background knowledge. You got to know what peanut butter is, what jelly is, what bread is, right? And then you need some skills, eye-hand coordination, in addition to some basic knife skills like which end goes up. There's also reasoning, more than you might think. What kind of bread do we buy? Jam or jelly? What flavor do people prefer? So when you get to reasoning, you may notice that the process will get a little bit harder for you because you're describing abstract cognitive processes, which tend to live at the upper end of Bloom's taxonomy. Design component 5. Now you may notice that I did not begin this design process with core content standards because I think those standards should inform but not drive your instructional choices. Also, they're so broad that many different kinds of writing fit into each category. So if you're writing anything with the possible exception of poetry, you will notice that it usually falls into a narrative, informational, or argumentative. So what you do is decide on a real world genre and purpose first, and then look to your content, Common Core standards in order to say, okay, well, how do they break these apart? Which ones am I fostering with this particular assessment? For instance, say that I want my students to write profiles, which is a kind of journalism that introduces a person to the general public. And you say to yourself, well, now that's informational. What are some of those components? Then you review the core. In this way, you're using standards to inform your decisions without letting it drive your values and creative processes. Design component 6, select texts. For this part of the process, you'll select texts that you can use as models that students can read as writers. So if I want students to write a profile article on someone else in the class and publish it in our middle school magazine, Who's Who, then I'm going to provide lots of profiles featuring people from diverse backgrounds. You teach these texts as you would others, building in pre-reading strategies, finding ways to check for comprehension, but your focus will be to extend thinking in order to pay attention to genre features. For instance, a profile usually describes and directly quotes the subject of the interview. You may even want to provide texts that aren't particularly effective so that your learners can compare and contrast. So much is up to you. Design component 7 and 8. I smushed these together because they're so closely related. This is where you List genre-specific elements in order to think about genre-sensitive strategies that you can teach explicitly. So we're finally getting to instruction. Say that I want my learners to write flash fiction so that they can practice economy with language by writing these supercharged and very short stories. A genre-sensitive strategy would definitely have to be attention to plot. So I could use this basic outline to help students practice plot elements. Somebody that's a protagonist, wanted, motive, but, conflict, so, and then. Notice that this is an appropriate story structure for young writers, including some young adolescents. We're not going to do something disrespectful like go right to Aristotle's unified plot structure, climbing the mountain to the climax, because A, the level of abstraction is not helpful to your learners, and B, adolescent learners will laugh themselves into a puddle every time you say it. Design principle 9, social learning. Now, integrating social learning is sensitive to the language acquisition of our students. Here you provide opportunities for students to talk about their ideas. So if you have very young children labeling a picture, they should be verbalizing a lot, explaining what they've drawn, since we know that, via Vygotsky, that talking with others precedes self-talk, which internalizes language, which is necessary for writing. No matter what age your students are, your question here will be, in what ways can I leverage the social situation in a way that can help facilitate thinking and writing? This will look different in middle school and high school, but what's common to everyone is that writing is at its heart a social act. It emerges because we have real things to say to real people. Design element 10, formative assessment, creating a benchmark activity. Think of formative assessment as all of the time you spend, say, practicing the violin, sometimes by yourself and sometimes with a more capable other person. Thank you, Vygotsky. Formative assessment doesn't just measure learning, it guides instruction. As a way of measuring student learning mid-process, I would like you to design a benchmark activity that you can give that will help you measure one valued characteristic of your writing assignment. Say if I'm going to have students write a field guide to one of their favorite places, and one of the things I want to do is have students integrate scientific language into informational text in ways that merge creative writing and informational writing, then one valued characteristic may be description. So a benchmark activity that I could use would possibly be building background knowledge about sensory detail with my learners, introducing short descriptive texts, identifying sensory details before asking my students to describe, say, a flower. Okay, my friends, before I let you go, I want to mention one last thing. As you build your own writing programs, you'll want to do your assignments with your students. Writing with your students not only sends the message that you are a writer as well and therefore learning, it also provides you a window into the cognitive complexity of the task you're asking for. So for the next 3 to 4 weeks, it will be up to you to pace yourself. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how you'll create authentic writing assignments that are respectful and mindful of your learners.